Hi, hi Becca. Welcome to BlueMagic777.com. Thank you for being here. And you have been since 2001, you have been connecting with others as intuitive, certified hypnotherapist, QHHT, EFT, and NLP practitioner, human design, evolutionary galactic astrologer, soul guide, and massage therapist. Yeah. Or message therapist, massage, right?
That's perfect.
During this time, you have developed a powerful and fun technique that teaches others how to become a master of letting go while they begin to turn their life into a walking meditation. In essence, bridging the gap between you and your higher self and becoming one with who you really are. And this part that I'm going to read now, I absolutely love. One thing that you would love to share with others is it doesn't matter what age you are or what your past holds. There is no right or wrong in who we are or in our self awakening. There's no right way to wake up. And nobody's doing it better than somebody else. And nobody is doing it better than somebody else. There is only the truth in remembering who we really are, and the rest just falls away. Welcome again.
I am so honored to be able to just share the conversation that I know is I just am excited for whatever energy is going to come forward. It's always a blessing to get to have these conversations because it really gives us an opportunity to really put that vibration and frequency out into the collective consciousness because we truly are. I feel like there's just such a beautiful rising and awakening that is happening. So thank you for having me here today.
You're most welcome. I'm excited about this too. And I just like to say that I'm part of your Flame Holders group that you have on your website with Becca.com. And since I joined, my knowledge, especially about human history, expanded, and about a lot of many other things too. But before we go to that topic, I would really like to ask you, how did all this started for you? Like, was it from early age or, I don't know, you had some special event in your life that just something switched? You have all these different types of people, right? So that awake at some point and somebody is from the beginning, and how was that for you?
Yeah, absolutely. Because I do. I think a lot of times, sometimes we feel like there's certain individuals that just have this magical ability that they are born with, and absolutely, there are individuals that I do feel come in, with particular contracts or agreements to have certain things switched on, maybe from a very early age, abilities, awarenesses. I feel like I'm very much like the majority of the individuals on the planet. I came in with what I later learned was an indigo type 3 contract. So it was a very complicated childhood for sure. I went through all of the different experiences that we could think of as feeling the highs and lows of this creation and this reality. But as a child, I do still have to this day a lot of my recollection and my memories from very quite early ages. And from very early ages, I was very aware of presence in the room. I constantly was having what I later learned was visitation or what we might think of as abduction experiences, but so regularly that I started to have just kind of a nervous system response of falling all the time because I constantly
Mm.
felt like I was being just dropped back in my bed. So there came a time where I was quite afraid to sleep in my room alone or in the dark because I always felt as though there was something watching. I always felt as though there was some sort of presence and a fear that I wasn't even really quite aware of. It wasn't until I think I was 6 or 7 years old when I had probably one of my most intense experiences where it became more known to me, but still I had no idea what was happening. Where I was going into full paralysis in my sleep time, where the room, everything would spin. I would feel out of my body. It would be as if I was lifting out of my body, and then consciousness would just kind of disappear. I wasn't given the gift of like really remembering a lot of the things that happened, but it was just this constant occurrence of constantly going into sleep paralysis, the room spinning, all of these different things happening. And there did come a time where it was so intense that I kind of wanted it to stop. So I stopped kind of sleeping in my room alone because it was just too much. Fast forwarding within that, my childhood experience didn't allow me to really get settled into any one place. We moved around a lot. I always joke that my mother was a bit of a gypsy just because she moved all the time. There was a restlessness within her heart. I much later learned she had very similar experiences as a child, but she chose to really shut them off and go into a very religious path in order to explain a lot of it. And I had a huge rebellious side to me. There was a very strong programming in me to not just go along with whatever was taught through the religious programmings and these kinds of things. I questioned everything that they said, and that did not bode very well. It didn't go over very well within that. So I was definitely, seen as difficult or not going along with things. And even at the age, I think it was, gosh, here in the United States, it is, I believe it was the seventh grade, sixth or seventh grade, where within the religion that I was raised in, there's a kind of a rule at that age. You now willingly take baptism because you're baptized as a child, but then at that age, there's even a class you prepare for baptism. And I was literally the only one in the class that I refused. And for whatever reason I refused, there was just this part of me again that I was the shame for the family for not doing it. But there was just something within. I felt so strongly, even in the religion and even in the church, that I didn't want to say the name of anyone. You know how in prayers, incantations, and pick any religion, pick anything. It's always revering a deity, praying to a god, a name, a person, an angel. And I had no idea why, but it made me sick to my stomach
Same.
to think of praying or evoking their name, because I kept saying, well, I don't know who they are. I don't trust them. There was just huge level of like, I'm not making a contract with you. And I felt like that even with the baptism. And my path wasn't easy as an Indigo 3. It was filled with a lot of the duality that comes with that, dealing with the challenges of really having that that secondary, soul, if you will, through the Indigo contract of assisting that being through. So there was always this morality thing that was going on, where there was this pure place within the heart that I really had a compassion and love for really helping. So the other aspect of the Indigo 3 was always a bit confusing to me because it always made me question, am I a good person? Am I okay? Like, what is these thoughts or what are these things that are going on? Within that, through that level at around the age of 18 was where it really started to click in. Again, still in the subconscious. I didn't really have a conscious awareness that this was like part of my path. But at that particular age, I had already been on my own by that time, not living at home anymore. And I got the nudge. It was like everything was crumbling around. It was literally that press up of either like going into the abyss of hell, if you will, of the realms of just sinking into the darkness, really. It was just nothing in that reality of where I was living at the time was uplifting. It would have just spiraled probably into drugs, into a negative path, into all of these different things had I stayed within that field. And at that time, it was just like this nudge. And an individual came into my field and they were like, just put an invitation. They're like, hey, come with me to Maui. And they had left and I was on my own. And it was just this nudge, like I have to do it. I'd never even thought of Hawaii before. I'd never even thought of the islands before. It wasn't even something that had been in my dreams or my memories. I didn't have any connection that I knew of at that time. And it just was this thing of like, I have to go. And then within that, I started having these visions of how everything was just going to unfold. And it was the first time I started to recognize that we can manifest our creation. We can manifest our reality. It doesn't matter how dismal, dark, or depressing or everything had felt. And, I want to be really transparent because I know there's a lot of people that have gone through those things, but I definitely, from the age of around 16, 17, had so much inundation from a lot of the attachments and the indigo 3 contracts that I went through those moments of not wanting to be on this earth anymore, what we would call suicidal ideation, or not wanting to be here, or those thoughts of like I just shouldn't be here, and interestingly enough, there was always just kind of this feeling like it's like I didn't belong here on this planet.
Mm.
But there was always something in my heart that was just like, no, I'm not going to quit. I'm not going to give up. Right. So I ended up buying a one-way ticket, packed one suitcase, went to the islands, and that's just kind of where everything started to unfold. Within there, it was like everything was constantly laid out. I look back in it, and those experiences really felt like literally divinely everything had been mapped out. Who came into my reality? I was taken in by the elders, the beautiful Hawaiian community took me in. It was as though I was just kind of protected within the space. And from the very beginning, again, from my path, from what my purpose is, I was never just shown the rainbows and the beautiful energy. It's like even the concept of Lemuria came so far later. They literally protected me and showed me all the dark.
Mm.
It was like I learned all the spirit realms. I learned how to travel through the spirit realms. I learned the darkest of the darkest of the dark at that time. And with learning that came the maturity of learning how to navigate it without fear, as then it progressed into the moment of my life where I literally thought, by then I was crazy. By that time, I definitely just accepted that I just thought different than everyone else. But it was this really quite miraculous moment where I had gone into a journey, and this beautiful cobalt blue dragon came to me. And of all the things that I have ever done, connecting with spirits, assisting with all these things and all of these astral realms and these different places with the ancestors, that felt like normal. A dragon coming to me, that was the moment where I'm like, okay, I've lost it. And it was quite amazing because even though I hadn't really dove too much into the galactic of everything, it felt calm and it felt normal to me. Because even talking about in the Hawaiian Islands, they talk about the little people as the Menehune. All right. So there's these beings of the Menehunes, and there's these beings of, like, they would call them like the star travelers, but more than that, the community that really took me in were these kapunas, these elders that would tell me the old stories of the Hawaiian Islands. And it was like commonplace. They'd be like, oh yeah, there would be spaceships that would just come and hover here. Oh yeah, the lights would always happen. Oh yeah, well, within these lava tubes, these are the beings that are here, and this and this and this. And so it was almost kind of like they would teach me the ancient stories, but at the same time, they'd just so casually be like, oh yeah, this is this occurrence, and this occurrence. And so there was unknowingly to me an awareness or an awakening of our galactic history, of our interconnectedness to the stars and to our to other races, that we are not alone as a human species. And it just felt so like, hey, like we could have been talking about anything, even though at that time it was just little by little watering the internal landscape for me. And it was really after the visitation, really, of the connection within with the dragon, that it just kind of took off from there. That's when I really started to explore other worlds, other places, and it started to kind of unravel. I do have a video on my YouTube channel that I talk about Lyra. Lyra would probably be one of the first places where it started to really reveal a lot of these reoccurring dreams and experiences, because I had dreams all the time. I've always been quite an avid dreamer since a child, but even especially in the Hawaiian Islands, because it's where I just started to really journal them more. I didn't really journal before then, but when I started to journal them, I was having dreams all the time about these wars in space, like spaceship wars, like planetary wars. Like I was having dreams about these all the time that felt so real. And I wasn't like a sci-fi, I wasn't like into like those movies and things. These were like lucid type dreams that I was having. So that's really kind of where it started from there. And it was really more about me starting to find the answers in my own journey, and also the guides just constantly bringing in, this is what to do next. This is what to do next. This is what to do next. And I started the healing arts, if you will, as far as through these studies of something referred to as intuitive medicine. That was honestly one of the first things I ever studied. And then from there, decided to actually finally answer the call of massage. I had put that off
Okay.
and answered that. And that's where I actually feel like I, in some ways, between the ocean and doing massage, kind of like cleared a lot of karmas, gave a lot of balance back to creation. And that's just kind of been the doorway that's led to today.
Today. Yeah, I mean, you know, you can really feel it, you know, how passionate and how you that you live this life, and you really like it's coming from the heart, right? So what you do, and you can feel that, and you know, and I have a question because this one intuitive plants or what is that? I never heard of that. What kind of how did okay? And second question is when you at the beginning did you do like meditations that you went through all of these realms or was just in dreams or how?
You know, um, other than just being a really quite a lucid dreamer,
Okay.
uh, the most interesting, so you got to recognize I was raised in a very traditional
Mm,
religion, one of the more strict of the strict, and they're referred to as Seventh Day Adventists, right?
okay.
So very very strict. So even the idea of talking to an angel almost was kind of like pretty much everything is either God or the devil.
Mm,
This kind of level. So within this programming, it was really interesting when I was in the Hawaiian Islands. This individual came into my reality. It was definitely a learning experience for me, but this particular individual was a trance channel,
okay.
but a very good trance channel, right? Like she had a gift for this and clientele all over the world. And it was really wild to me because of all the things for the Guardians to bring into my field is literally kind of being taught through this modality. And I never ever did the trance channeling. Like she was the type of individual that would 100% leave her body and not remember any of it and then come back. You know, the no stuff, right? The don't do that stuff. And I never did that. I've always remained conscious within all of my transmissions. But it was always really interesting starting to recognize that a lot of my training in the very beginning of even just being aware of these things was coming from being an assistant to someone who did this. And
Okay.
within there, it was a short-lived path within it. Um, I immediately found the wrongness in the path. There was something that didn't feel right about it to me. Like it didn't feel right to have these people addicted to you, like they needed you for answers, like they needed to call you. And we also, there was a very karmic thing. I won't go into it because I just want to
It,
give reverence and love for the experience of
yeah,
it.
I understand.
I learned a lot about how I allowed myself to get taken advantage of quite a bit. That was my journey, right?
Of course.
So, within that, that particular individual, and I will say this is very interesting. She would try to do spells and rituals to kind of control me. Not to kind of, but to literally control me, right? Because she didn't like that I was growing and expanding really fast. And I remember one day she came to me and she said, this isn't gonna work anymore. She said, and the weirdest thing she ever said was, your mom prays for you too much. And it was really interesting to me because what it really signified is the entities and the things she was working with was really trying to create a subservience. But the prayers of my mother was actually having a bit of an effect of blocking the energy. So, there is a really neat thing to recognize within that. And then from there, honestly, the next modality that they brought into my reality was Tai Chi.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's just kind of rolled from there. But again, I had already by that time started working with intuitive medicine, which uh, this actually comes from a body of work from an individual, Francesca McCartney.
Okay, I don't know.
And I
Okay.
don't know if a lot of people know about her, but I mean old school.
Okay.
Kind of similar to the Barbara Brennan
Okay.
model of schooling. Her schooling is in Marin County in California. I've visited there, but I studied remotely and I studied with one of their students in the Hawaiian Island. And this particular individual, um, she taught a level of intuitive medicine of even being able to sit, say, within a surgery room if someone was getting surgery and to be
Okay.
able to assist on that level. So it was really all the basics of the initiations of the chakras, the auras, the energy system, scanning through. So it was really quite profound because it really started to open up validating the visuals and the third eye experiences that I was having
Mhm.
and starting to train them really in for the highest good. How
Mhm.
we could use it for healing, for good, because that's always been a deep passion. But honestly, working with the trance channel was what shut me down for a little while because I learned how can someone who could actually bring information that seems so light and so good actually hold so much dark. That was the biggest learning for me. And then from there, that's honestly what pushed me later to actually get really intrigued with hypnotherapy because I was like, I don't want to give people answers. I don't want to be the resource of someone's answers. I want to be a catalyst for individuals to be able to find their own answers. And so hypnotherapy was the path that I started on to blend everything
Yeah.
together
Okay.
as it started moving into a lot of what the soul coaching course is now.
Mm. Yeah, but I really like that about it because there are so many ways. I mean, you have these courses and I was talking to a friend, I think just before Sunday or previous week, I don't really doesn't really matter. And she asked me like, so I was explaining about you, and she's like, so are you following somebody or what's here like, what is here? I said like, no, 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 it's just you do it for yourself. There's no like God or there's no like she or whatever. It's just like here are tools, and this is why we do it. And I just finished your clearing course. Okay. And
Yeah.
yeah, and so I just want to explain to people like what I really, really like, So I need like 14 days or whatever to go through, but what I really liked it is because in each part of that course, what I one, part two, and so on, that you first explain what we are doing and why and the history of it, right? And I really like because I also have on the website Laszlo, Schrödinger, and all of these kind of people that I'm presenting, and then you mix their knowledge and you explain it. And this is for me was like, oh, okay, she it's not just one way street, right? Like this is it, but it's like, oh, it's all combined, right? And law one, and it's all of that. So this was for me like, oh, okay, this is upgrade for me knowledge, like a new source of for my ascension, for my path, whatever you want to call it. So this one really, and I really see in the meditations that and the language that I would really like to now touch a little bit about history. And I know these are the topics that just about this question I'm gonna ask now. We can talk about probably 10 hours, right? So I'm gonna let you to shorten, to explain it or whatever, however you want it with your own words. But there's a history that we don't know, or that is forgotten, or people don't know it, or it's hidden, whatever. And I would like you to just go shortly from 950 billion years ago. And because I'm gonna put later on in when I'm editing this, I'm gonna put that your picture where you have explained the words. But why I'm asking you this, because I would just like as short as possible to bring us to where the human starts and how and our the DNK, so how it's all that kind of combined, and why is 12 strengths and all of that, because I wanted that later to connect to these times and what's happening now with
Mm.
our ascension, evolution, and stuff. But I would just like to give this because even for me, it's just with the Shayana Din work with that you also combine with many other stuff. For me, when I found her books, was like, oh, this makes sense. Okay, it was just like the feeling. Okay, I don't really understand 90% of it at the moment, but like I know this makes sense. It just makes sense, right? So if you could just a little bit tell us about the history and where 15 time matrix.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I'll kind of step it down a little
Okay.
bit. So really one of the key things that we can first embrace is that our Milky Way galaxy is actually connected to the Andromedan mother galaxy, and
Okay.
that our history here actually started there. And within the 950 billion year kind of story of the Milky Way galaxy is that really what happened within the Andromedan galaxy is that there was a Christic race, there was a group, and that we're going to see that this kind of happens again with the Elohim here in the Milky
Mhm.
Way system. But there was a group that basically had started to go into a level of what we would think of as anti-Christic or distorted. So let's describe what that is very simply. Anti-Christic or distorted within our level of consciousness means we start to embrace service to self, starting to embrace, I want power, I want control, I want to create, and I don't care if it hurts anything else. So, really, what that means is that in levels of creation, we could see this on Earth, that at different times we could imagine, oh, hey, we're going to live in harmony with cosmic law and nature.
Okay.
But then somebody maybe comes along and says, that's too slow. I want to build this here now. I want this now. So I don't care. Go blow it up. Go clear the space. Go just make it happen.
Mhm.
Well, unfortunately, in some of these experiences, the wars that took place there within this family line, the technology that they use is really what we would think is of scalar weapons, kind of you probably they're plasma type weapons. I was never a weapons specialist in
Yeah.
any of my lifetimes, but they are the type of weapons that have the absolute ability to blow up a moon, to blow up a planetary body, to really explode massive levels. And really what they do is they create kind of a radiation field into the core of a planet, and then the core of the planet gets excited and literally destroys the planet. Well, within that, what that does many times is we don't recognize that the fabric of creation is quite delicate. It is a fractal. It is something that, you blow up a star, you blow up a planet, many times the gravitational kind of sucking in literally pulls that system into what is a black hole. And so that is really kind of how the Milky Way system got created to within that particular war. Within that falling in of the system, there is a huge level of our Andromedan founders races. So if within the Keylontics perspective or within the ascension mechanics, I like to just kind of use the ascension because there are
Yeah.
multiple resources we could look at for this. This would be seen as the yanas or the founders races. But if we looked at this from Gnostic perspective, we might think of this as like the realms of the aeons, right? So within these massive pluromas, these massive fields of pure primal sound and light fields emerged into this creation that they seeded, that the Milky Way galaxy, in its sense, as it broke away, that there was a choice to actually seed it with the template, the blueprint. And when we think of blueprint, because we think of this all the time, I want to upgrade my DNA, I want to upgrade my blueprint. What are we really doing? Is we're reattuning our consciousness back into the consciousness of the divine.
Okay.
That I know a lot of times think of it as something else, but really, if everything is the mind of the all, we're really tuning ourselves back into our levels of integrity of law of one thinking, really. And so this level of blueprint, as it started to emerge within here, everything actually started to kind of cruise along for a really long time, probably like 400 billion years. It was going along. Everything was working really well. And this is from kind of my own perspective of like remoting in and records and looking, is I really feel like an outside system kind of got in. Right. And within that, there was a level of creation that did go into a fall, but it went into an organic fall. It was basically like it evolved, but it just didn't have the energy to sustain itself. And so it started to digress. Digression usually happens through digression of a genetic pool. And when that happens, it starts to digress consciousness where consciousness can't continue on. Well, the particular race that was involved within that got really curious about why it went into fall. And let me just kind of put this way too. We want to recognize too digression in a genetic pool. And I'm going to say this in not the most appropriate way, but if we were to imagine a culture that started to inbreed too much, brothers and sisters having babies for too many generations, the intelligence level of that species starts to digress. This is a scientific fact, really, that we know of on Earth, right? So this is what it means many times. Digressive genetic pool is either interbreeding of species that don't go together starts to occur, and then digression of consciousness. And when that happens, those species tend to be more attuned to aggression, lack of conscious thinking, lack of empathy, and these kinds of things. And then over a period of time, that culture or that creation will implode on itself.
Mhm.
It doesn't have the living light form anymore. This is the battle we're dealing with here on Earth. If there is a battle, it's a spiritual battle. It's a battle for our consciousness, for us to actually learn to evolve back into higher thinking, honestly. And as much as we want to point fingers at other people, really it's ourself that we really want to just hold that responsibility. So within this level of that digression, that there was an organic collapse of a system, and there was a race line that Ashiana refers to as the Borth Sala race line. That they literally they like oh they got so sad for why that creation died, that they wanted to study it. They got curious about it. They wanted to understand. So they actually invented something from these really higher level planes, something called the victim victimizer program. And they said, we're going to figure it out. We're going to figure out why did it go wrong, and let's figure out if we can fix it from the inside out. But what we want to recognize is that this is going to be kind of the cycles that we're seeing in everything that is happening. And this is, if I could summarize it very, very simply, is that we get into a level of creation as a physical form, whether it's a Lyran, Andromedan, Pleiadian, a Syrian, an aquatic being, a dragon being, it doesn't matter what we evolve into. That when we move into a creation, and if we go into a matter form and take on that form, it creates a bit of a disruption of our consciousness of our eternal nature of who we are, and we go into it kind of like getting like sucked into a movie. We get into it, and the matter form many times creates this forgetfulness because matter is binding. It binds on our consciousness, and we have a forgetfulness to the eternal nature of who we are, and we become so hyper focused on the world that we're in that we believe that that is all that's real. I feel at the core of everything, that is what we're here to dispel. Because the moment these beings started to jump in, and think of it as they're coming from these soul or oversoul fields. This is, we got to remember, we came from some kind of soul or oversoul field and merged with this physical body. They did the same thing. They were a field of consciousness. And then from that field of consciousness, they took parts of their spark of consciousness and animated the forms in their new creation to experience the victim victimizer program. But the second they got into that creation, the creation was so overwhelming and powerful, they lost themselves in it. And not only that, the victim victimizer program took off like a virus. So it became so real to them that they wanted to point fingers and blame, shame, guilt, all of these things, that it began to create almost kind of this virus into the creation of forgetfulness of who we are. Now, there is a whole lot of other story within creation, other systems, other beings that started to come in. But the primary thing that we want to start to recognize is, as we move into this, is that within there, the guardian races or the Janus races or the founders races from, think of it again as the pleroma if you want to look into the Gnostic teachings. But as we look at these levels of thinking, that these are God field realms, and that many times they keep reinfusing energy into creation. That no, we can correct it, we can fix this, we can actually get the Christ consciousness going back in creation again. So within this, as creation progressed, there is always a sense of so much compassion within creation that there's these plans, these missions that get created. So some of these missions were created, that the beings that went into fall in say some of these victim victimizer programs, that they took many of them in order and placed them into another phantom system to be able to help rehabilitate them. That created a whole other drama. I won't go into it because it's a whole other story, but if we can just kind of imagine, there's always these attempts for rehabilitation, for help. Like, we don't give up. Like the Christ spark, the Crystalla spark, the Christar consciousness has such a love that there's always a sense of never creating a judgment. There's always a sense of doing everything to bring any spark back that chooses to reattune back into the light. And that's what we're in the middle of right now. So then it really kind of takes us into our Lyran, the first war. I think that is, you got people like Lisa Royale, you got all kinds of individuals that wrote, The Cradle of Lyra and all these different things that have really started to bring into our awareness this inception point. I think it's really quite prevalent in our remembrance now, that Lyra, the cradle of really the humanid form. But the humanid form didn't look quite like us. The humanid form had all kinds of forms. It was everything from humanid aquatic to humanid reptilian to humanid leonine, all of these different forms, humanid, insectoid, the mantis race lines, all of these, avian, all of these were part of the humanid form. And creation was again going again, but we know that the time in Lyra was really where it started to bring the war kind of down in the dimensional fields. So the war in Lyra was probably one of the most catastrophic for our level of getting locked into the Milky Way system, because at that particular time, uh, through the evolution of the species, you got to imagine this over billions of years of time. Species are evolving, they're getting really advanced, they're creating technologies, interstellar spaceships, populating planetary systems, doing interplanetary trades. And the customs and the cultures in those systems were totally different, right? So, even just for instance, within certain of the Lyran races, the Lyran reptilian races. And these again, these were not a fallen race. They were actually very beautiful. There's many reptilian races that are very, very beautiful, compassionate, loving race lines and beings. And within there, as their cultures started to digress and kind of slip, there was an infiltration again. Think of these infiltrations are always coming in thought forms. And I do feel that it was actually an infiltration that came in through the Draco system from a species that came out of the Milky Way system. So there are these kind of rips, tears, kind of access points that happen from time to time. A lot of times they happen through nebula systems and things like this, where it's time distortion. Again, it's very scientific, so I'm not a super expert on it, but they show me the idea of it. And these are kind of like sometimes outside creations from whole other galaxies. You can think whole other systems can sometimes enter in. And the one that really entered in that I thought was very destructive is very much like an insectoid type of race line. It just assimilates things and it gets into the consciousness, and within the consciousness it creates this empowerment idea of control, conquer, and assimilate. Control, conquer, assimilate. And I feel like the reptilian races in the Draco system were very easy for them to get into the cortex of the brain and start to create this hierarchy system that started to create this very militant energy of, now I need to conquer, control, and assimilate and turn these all into my empires and kingdoms. It's the same thing we see within, and let's please be very apparent and aware that they don't even hide it here. They call it draconian law here on planet Earth, which I think
Yeah,
is wild.
yeah,
But it's the same thing. The British Empire, what did they do? Control, conquer. I don't care if there's an indigenous species that already lives on this continent. I have a flag. I'm going to plant it, and now this is going to be the British Empire. And that's how the tiniest place of Britain literally became one of the biggest empires on the planet. But we could go back. We could see this through Byzantine times, Phoenician times, Alexander the Great times, all of those. We would see this replicating. Those are all replicas of what entered in that Draco system. So this infiltration actually started to come in, and these royals, they really were royal lines, these royal draconian lines that came in, and they started to actually, they created their kind of their own drama in Draco, and a bunch of them ran away. Like they ran away from their own creations. They got scared of their own creations and they ran away, and they ran away to Lyra. And when they went into Lyra, I mean, obviously they were recognized as part of the races of creation, and so they took station there. But they started to infect the consciousness, especially within a lot of the reptilian lines. At that particular time, the reptilian culture was a little bit different. They, the males and females didn't actually live together. The females were designed different, and it wasn't a good or bad. It wasn't about males or females or anything like that. It's just the males were designed for a particular purpose and creation as just an inception and creation. And the females were really designed, and they really did live the mystic path, the oracle path, the path of really kind of what we would think of these priestess energies. And all they really spent their entire time working with these mystical types of practices and connecting with the fields of consciousness of creation.
Mhm.
But there was the need for procreation and bringing together the male and female. Well, over time, there used to be a ritual where once a year, and who knows what length of year their year was in Lyra, but the males would come from their planet and they would intermingle with the females, and there would be like a mating ritual that would happen. And then the males would go back, and the males kind of had their own culture. It was its own divine culture that they were living. But over time, as the virus started to infect, the males became less and less interested in that part of the path and in that part of the mystical path. They became less and less interested into what the mystic path was. And so that is where we start to see in many of the histories, you start to see the distortion between the male and female. It was in this blending of the mystic path. The male started to go a bit more into the technical and the scientific and the creation and the material creation. And it was at this time where it eventually progressed into a massive war. There was a coup, if you will, or a plan within some of these reptilian races in more in the Vegas system, that they said, man, you know what we're going to do? And part of my language, but they were like, screw the founders, screw the council, screw the Royal Lyran Council, screw like the councils within the Andromedan galaxy. We want this Milky Way system. They can have that, but we want this Milky Way system. We want the planets. We want to create it however we want to create, and we want this is ours. Well, there obviously that didn't go very well. So a war ensued. What this war was is that they actually went after the 12th Stargate in Aramatena, a higher dimensional etheric planetary system within Lyra that they wanted to overtake. They were like, if we can overtake the 12th Stargate, not only can we now actually control everything from 12th dimension down, but we can actually potentially eventually maybe even take over Andromeda in Mother Galaxy, right? But they at first were really just wanting to overtake the Milky Way galaxy. The founders' races from the Andromedan system, they knew what was going on. And within there was a sense, there again, there's always a love and compassion. Within this particular time within creation, there was this sense of like, do we just scrap this experiment? Do we just shut down? Do we just like literally destroy the entire Milky Way galaxy basically and bring it back in as its pure quota or quanta of light? And they said, no, no, we're not going to do that. They said there's too many amazing evolved species already that are beautiful, they're divine, they're Christic. We're going to let it play out. But we have to protect the higher dimensional realm. So they created a cap. They created actually a seal. Each dimensional layer actually has subdimensions. They created a seal at 12.5 and they went down and they created another cap down below. So in between the bands of 11 and 12, and they capped. That was the time we got cut off from God, if you will, if you want to look at it. It was a time when we legitimately first became cut off from God's source, if you will. And we were now on our own in a sense here, but there was still ways for us to have connection. At this particular time within creation, I'm really summarizing a lot of things.
It's okay. It's okay. Please continue.
There was, the inception of particular managerial race lines. And one of the primary managerial race lines was this race line referred to as the Elohim. The Elohai, the Elohim. We know of also the Seraphi, Seraphim. They had a different purpose. There was the Braharaman races, and they had another purpose within creation. And all these creations were going. But the Elohai Elohim, they were really placed within a station of guardianship, kind of like the judges and the magistrates, the ones that were going to be kind of put in place of like, okay, well, now it's on your shoulders to keep the God source energy flowing in this creation so that creation can come back. So let's kind of fast forward within this. And within creation, there's a sense of many times that same feeling that we have, a couple steps forward and then it feels like a couple steps back. Within there, a lot of creation actually started to move out of Lyra during those wars. It was probably our biggest wound that we had. A lot of us started to feel like it was our fault. We were responsible. Like if we would have known better, we would have stopped it. So the guilt, the victim victimizer game, and that guilt, shame, blame, pointing fingers, and all of these things, many of the Christic races started to point fingers at themselves, therefore starting to actually subjugate themselves into lifetimes of being the martyr, being the servant, being punishing themselves in many incarnational experiences for feeling so guilty. Others went into tyrants of lifetimes of wanting to actually get revenge or to make right within creation. But within that, creation had still a very strong blueprint to it. And what had happened is there was already set in place kind of stations of connections within the other aspects of the tree of life, or these planetary places within constellations. And a huge portion moved into the Orion system because it had one of the most powerful energy systems within there. The Mintakan, or the eighth Stargate, it isn't just like a randomly picked place. It is actually within, especially the energy of the Orion Nebula, one of the most potent, powerful places of the birth of stars. This is there's a reason why the Orion is such an important system. A whole other group, through the magistrate of the Royal Lyran Councils, took station within the Sirius star system, especially within Sirius B. Now, they were in higher dimensional planes at this particular time, not really in physical form, but holding stations of what we would think of as the Christ Council. So this was kind of the managerial position for the lower stations. And then within there was other stations that started to take place even within the Taran system in the Pleiades. So in the Alcyone and in the Taran system within the Pleiades. There's other stations that were taking place, but let's just focus on these just for our Earth history. Within there, as Orion became such an important place within the cosmos, it became one of the next big wars, and this was known as our metagalactic wars. These were the Orion Gaian wars. Within their, massive levels of creation were already taking place in a very divine and beautiful way. And as always, anything that's really beautiful in creation, these anti-Christic forces were coming in to overtake them. They wanted this station. One of the primary families that got targeted within the Orion system, because there was a Trinity station within there. It was the Trinity masculine, and it was the Trinity family of the Melchizedek, the Michael, and the Metatron. Each of them were geomantics. They were geometry beings. They were beings that held blueprints of creation. So Metatron was actually really important because Metatron actually held the codes of time. They held the codes of time and structure, and primarily the wisdoms and the template of creation for the 45-degree angle. So there, we've learned that there was a reason why they were more heavily targeted. The Michael family lineage line was primarily the gold ray lineage line, and they held a lot more of a connection to the Seraphi, Seraphim energies. And the reason why they were so targeted and important is because they had the ability for power, movement, moving through the dimensions of creation, and being the manifestation template of form. So they were heavily targeted. The Melchizedek family lineage held more of the blue ray energy, and they were also targeted. So, and just to say, the Metatronic held more of the magenta or the violet. But the Melchizedek energy, it was also targeted, but it was able to actually stabilize and hold more of its sacred geometry throughout creation. So the Melchizedek family started to become the God seed blueprint to help be the restoration. That's what we are primarily connected to. And it doesn't matter what family line anyone is connected to, they can still utilize the blue flame, the blue ray, and the Melchizedek template to return home. The Michael family lineage line held a warriorship for quite a bit. It fought really hard. It eventually did fall in one of the wars into being kind of pulled into entrapment and enslavement, but it was the Metatron family that really took the biggest hit and got sucked into this phantom system. It got overrun in their mind and their thought of control, and they got used through the Metagalactic Wars to actually create a cube system of entrapment, soul recycling, and entrapment for all creation that was really taking place within the soul, and primarily in the oversoul level, but primarily that the soul fields would start to actually go into what was known as reincarnational cycles, being trapped in the lower realms with no access points because now they were kind of in a cube or a box rather than having the eternal geometry. Now, within this time, this during this wars, these would be very much like the Polarian Wars. These would be the wars that we would start to think of similarly, to it's actually a little bit further back than what we would think of as the Titan Wars and the Tiamat Wars, but massive, massive wars of like electrical fields of the galactic forces. Within this, one of the things that started to transpire within this is that from that particular war, this is really where the inception of starting to create more administrations within the higher stations to actually come in, security teams, Templar security teams. There was this huge plan that started to get put into place in the past for the future, which was the Orifem template. There was this design. This is really where we start to see the inception of what was going to be our future human form that we're taking. At that point, there were humanoid form, but many of the humanoid form were more what we would think of as the Lyran Syrian, tall whites, many of the extraterrestrial looking kind of humanoid forms. But within this particular war, this is where they're created again yet another shutdown gate. So everything past the 8 dimensions started to get trapped in the lower forms. They started to target a lot of the 7th dimensional beings, which we would see as the Arcturian families and even the Andromedan families. And when they started to target these, they started to pull a lot of these higher dimensional beings into creating these hybrid control races, which we would later see as these different Anunnaki hybrid races. Basically, these dominating races and forces that were really working again off of these hierarchies, militant forces, rulerships. Think of it as like kings and queens hierarchies. We talk sometimes about even recognizing this through the caste system that you see in India that was really prevalent, still to this day has an influence there. Well, that's really kind of the inception of this, and this energy of starting to want to trap angelic souls into incarnating into physical forms. And once they got trapped into the physical form, they wanted to keep them trapped there so that they could actually feed off of their energy and actually use them for their own purposes. So if we can again remember that when we, as a spark, incarnate into a form, many times we get trapped into the form, not so much because the form is trapping us, but because we identify our consciousness too much with the form. And then we get stuck there. So as that progressed, it kind of just roller coasters from there. We go from there into the electric wars, and these electric wars, they really and if I was to give a semblance of a time, and I don't have it right off the top of my head, the Orion Gaian Wars, but I want to say it's something like 500 million years ago ish or something like this, and then the electric wars really started to take place about 5 million years ago as far as an energy. And I might, please don't quote me on the time, I don't have them. It's hard to keep a lot of the Rolodex of the timelines in there. But within this, the electric wars took place within the Pleiadian system. There was a sense at this particular time after the Orion Wars, a massive kind of creation of these Anunnaki race lines. Well, why? this all started from this question that you had about the our human form. Where did humanity
Yeah.
start from? Well, this is where it really started. During the Gaian Orion Wars, there was the massive plan from the Guardians, and this is where we really started to create the inception of the Orphem, starting to create the inception of what was then known as the Terranusium race line. These were the original root races, but the Terranusium ones were massive. They were really what we would think of as these Hyperborean type of beings, right? These Hyperborean Polarian beings. They were massive. They lived within more of the harmonic universe 3, starting to step them down into harmonic universe 2. So we're talking about seventh dimensional beings, and then wanting to step them down into fifth dimensional beings, right? And as we look at these beings, these were the original prototype, but within there, the they were destroyed. I'm gonna fast forward a little bit. There was a targeting against them. There was a feeling within these fallen Elohim lineage lines, who were the Anu Elohim from the Lyran system, that they started to think, man, no, 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 no. These beings that are being created, these Terranusium race lines, they have too many emotions. They have too much activated in their system. And if they actually start to evolve and get within our higher dimensional fields, their emotions could actually create a lot of destruction. So there was a plan through a lot of these on family lineage lines that they wanted to actually destroy. And this is where the Anunnaki kind of legions and armies started to come from, was that they were created primarily to destroy the angelic human race lines. They didn't want them created. But these races were really important because every angelic that was getting trapped in a body, they needed a way to get back out. They needed a form that was going to hold enough consciousness to help them remember their true identity and spark of their eternal oneness that they were, so that they could get back out. So the Terranusium 1 race, when it got destroyed through these electric ores, they tried again. They did the Terranusium 2. It was a step down. It was starting to become smaller, a little bit smaller, what we would think of as what we would recognize. Well, during the second seeding of them, there was also a creation of a lot of guardian race lines to get created. This is where we start to see the story of the Cantarians coming in. It was through the secondary thing that the Terranusium, the second seeding, the Terranusium 2 second seeding, these really advanced Templar Melchizedek bloodlines, they got inundated by these Anunnaki race lines and forced bred with them. And that's when the Nephilim came into being. And after the inception of the Nephilim, there was all yet another catastrophe, a whole other mayhem that was started, because this race line was too, it was part of really this anti-particle world, and they were destructive. They were killing the forms. They were bred for war. They were bred for destruction. So it was, again, an angelic race trapped in a form that didn't give it the ability to have its highest consciousness. There was a huge plan that was like, man, these Nephilim, if they stay here, they're going to destroy everything. So the Guardians came and they evacuated many of them. They evacuated many of them to different star systems. I believe Polaris was one of them. They evacuated many of them to these other systems where they could kind of evolve, but many of their souls through dying got trapped in the Earth field. They devised a plan to wipe out the rest of them. They couldn't do. This was the one of the flooding stories. Ice ice walls that got created, all of this that wiped out that, but it also wiped out the second seeding. After that, the third seeding came, which is what we're part of. So we're part of this really long galactic story of what we are really doing. Is we are in a very specialized form. We are part of this Terranusium race sign that is within a form that all of you that are indigos, all of you that are connected to something that feels like you don't fit in with this system, that you've maybe felt caged in, trapped, or that you don't belong here. It's because you came here with the wiring that says, no, we actually have the right to return and have our full inheritance restored to us as angelic beings. But the only way to do that is we have to clean up our own stuff. And part of us now having this connection of these higher dimensional strands, the Terranusium race lines were designed in order to actually create bloodline templates that could hold the potentiality of the 12 strand DNA, little by little reweaving it so that it could move past the distortions. Because I kind of skipped past this one aspect of this, but really what a lot of the fallen races did, a lot of the fallen draconian races and the Anunnaki races did, is they were specifically unplugging the 11th strand and the 10th strand from their DNA so that higher dimensional beings couldn't incarnate in to their soul pools and start to restore or rehabilitate their big devised plan of controlling the whole universe. So they were like, no, we're going to make sure none of you guys get into our soul field. So we're going to unplug strand 11. We're going to unplug strand 10. Some of them even unplugging down to 11 that they couldn't even incarnate anyone higher than these realms so that no one would come in and bring ethics and law of one teachings into their consciousness field. So the Terranusium races have been the restoration vehicle for every type of hybrid race that's ever been created in creation. Indigo race lines will have the ability to blend Anunnaki races, reptilian race lines, Christic Templar race lines, lineage line because the indigo template has the ability to restore it. And the way we restore it is actually restoring it through restoring our levels of consciousness, clearing out the distortions, reattuning ourselves back into our divinity, and not giving our power away. So stuff like the seals and implants clearing. So that is a very long, shortened version of our
Yeah.
galactic history.
Uh, thank you so much for this because it's impossible to, impossible to do this in this time we have today. And you did an amazing job because for everybody's like go to your webpage, YouTube, and Ashiana's didn't work. We'll explain that even more. And it's amazing. For me, it was just like, oh my God, like, the story just got so bigger than I thought before, right? So with all of that saying, let's go to now to a present time. And why are these present times? And what I would like to connect is two things. Okay, one is as we as individuals that we do shadow work, that we work on ourselves. Call that ascension, whatever you want to call it. How is that connected to the times of, if we look from ascension, like yuga cycle that we are in, and everything that is happening now with this ascension times that is changing everything. And a lot of people that we are aware of it, we can feel it. A lot of people that are maybe not aware of it, maybe they're like, oh, what's going on? There's so many, going on things in my life, and maybe they don't know it. And if you can explain about that a little bit, how is that these two things connected?
Yeah, that's actually a really a beautiful question. It's a big question too.
Yeah.
In some ways, the shortened version of it is to recognize that we hold the energy of all the founders within us. So that gold flame, the blue flame, the magenta flame, and each of these is connected to what we would say as angelic lineage lines or universal families, right? Well, all of these universal families, we would think of them as going like, oh, well, how do they get stuck? They get stuck through reincarnational cycles. So we're gonna kind of take it big and then let's go super small and
Okay.
simple to understand this. And the simple way to understand this is that we get stuck through our limiting beliefs, um our shadow, if you will, and the things that we don't clean up in a lifetime that we hold with us. So that would be things like, say, we go through an incarnational life, but we have resentment, or we never feel like our parents loved us. So we always felt like the outsider, like we were never good enough and nobody ever loved us, and these kinds of things. Or maybe we died with fear or hatred because somebody took our life in that lifetime. Well, any of those are actually unresolved energy charges in our field. And those unresolved energy charges literally are kind of like shards in our field that, think of it kind of like almost kind of like a metallic or a metal, that if you wanted to get out of the magnetic field of the Earth's gravitational field, all of that stuff would actually keep you kind of stuck like a magnet to the Earth field. I'm going to say that in a super simple way. So within this, we have the energy of so many lifetimes of our ancestors that are actually like ghosts or soul shards or soul fragments that are embedded within the Earth's records, the Earth's memories. And what is our body made of? The Earth records, the Earth, we're made up of her. So the moment where we're born, we literally have in our cells of our body the stories and the songs of all of those that have shared this Earth template before us. And so this is part of how we are the bioregenesis and
Mhm.
what the ascension is. So as we've come into this yuga cycle, we are at a very special time
Yeah.
because every 26,000 five, I'm just going to say
Yeah, it's about that. It's
26,500.
about that
Yeah.
26,000, whatever. It's around there.
We go into these cycles, these yuga cycles, and every time that we get into these alignments to these solar bodies, like the Sirius star system and the Pleiades, we have these abilities for our light body to actually supercharge and for our consciousness to open up and for us to get back into our universal families. But because of the different dramas and wars and these frequency fences that have been placed, we've actually been trapped here for 7 of those cycles. And very few souls have gotten out, which means there's been a buildup of souls here. So it's kind of a little bit more crowded than it should be. And within this, there is an energy that has come through that our guardians never let us down. They have never stopped. They have we as our connection to them have never stopped. And within this is that we get to recognize this, that there is something very special about this particular ascension cycle because our founders, fathers' energies have been restored. The Michael families have been restored. Even the Metatronic families are in a state of restoration and repair. So what that means is all of these vibrational energies are starting to come back into alignment, and they come back in alignment through these plasma fields of these solar bodies that are coming into our system through these Elisa Melchizedek streams. As they're coming in, we have something that we haven't had for the last 7 yuga cycles, and that is a fully restored sphere of Amenti passageway that we can actually have our ability to get out of here. And all that we have to do is recognize that everything we've been holding within us, it's not personal. It's we're here as is to help our ancestors. We're held to help all of those that have been stuck for so long in this entrapment, if you will. And that the less we can identify with what we're feeling and the more we can just recognize it's something passing through us, we can actually very quickly realize that you are a walking stargate and you can let all these energies start to pass through you and to return back to their universal families. There's nothing you have to do other than have that intention to not hang on to them. Don't make them yours. Don't identify with the body. Let them pass on through. And that's the magic that I really feel of this ascension right now.
Hmm. Oh, wow, beautiful. I have like
Super
some,
shortened version for you.
yeah, I mean, yeah, this was one of my biggest, like, how I'm gonna this ask all these questions. And like, hopefully she'll find short versions, but yeah, it was great. Um, okay, so let's go to like questions that are like on internet that like a lot of people, there's like so many information, from 3D to 5D. What is that? I want you to answer. I don't want to give my opinion about it, but I see all these different versions of it, right? and everybody, some people are waiting, somebody's gonna come and rescue us, and some people are, thinking, oh, now we're just gonna step in a different world, timeline. In some way, yes, but it's not going to be any more poverty or whatever suddenly, so what is that from your knowledge and everything? How do you see that transition?
Yeah, that is a it is the big topic for sure.
Yeah,
One of the things I like to remind humanity is for all of us, because again, there can be a lot of times where we go like, oh, well, I'm 40, I'm 5D, I'm 60, I'm 8D. I'm like, well, as we get more mature with this, we start to recognize that if we were truly vibrating at those dimensional frequencies, first of all, you wouldn't even be in a carbon-based body anymore.
yeah,
You would have actually transferred your form into another form, because even at fifth dimension, you're starting to turn more into a luminous silica based body. And within this, one of the things we want to recognize is that dimensions actually have to do more with dimensions of our consciousness that we're accessing. So yes, as we are here holding the Christos template, as we are here connecting to the Christ consciousness fields, we can actually start to attune our energy to the higher dimensional fields. But for all intents and purposes, we are still very much existing within what we would say the third dimensional matter form. But you can sense how it's starting to feel like it doesn't, like it's almost like you're walking around in a dream. So third dimension has subdimensions, like it would go 3.1, 3.2, 3.3, 3.4. I like to think of it in the old school radios when you
yeah,
would turn the dial. Same as you even start to move into the fourth dimension. There is a lot of individuals that are really attuned now, primarily more into the fourth dimension. This would be the astral field. This is going to be where you really feel like you're walking around in a dream more. And this is where I would say a lot of the individuals that are really working through clearing out their own stuff are existing within the bands of 4, 4.1, 4.2, 4.3, 4.4, so on and so forth. Yes, indigos do come in with what is known as an activated six-dimensional strand, but it's not necessarily implying that their six-dimensional consciousness is activated. To be really blunt and truthful, most humanity is still operating at two-dimensional consciousness. Two-dimensional consciousness means that someone is primarily just operating off of their deep subconscious reaction and action. They act very much more on just a habitual way and never question why they do what they do, never question why they think what they think. And just, I don't say this in any negative kind of way, but it is the same way that an animal thinks. An animal just exists. They don't question their purpose. They don't question their consciousness. They don't question why they were hungry. They just know, I'm hungry, I'm going to eat, right? It's two-dimensional thinking. A huge level of the population on planet Earth is actually still operating off a two-dimension. Third dimension is where we start to question, who am I? What is my purpose? It is the initial phases of starting to recognize your I am and that Gnostic know thyself path that starts to question, where did that hurt come from? Why? And that's the initial stages that we might even see ourselves going through some of, like, say, the clearing processes and these kinds of things, is actually starting to work from the three-dimensional. But many times the three-dimensional is still looking at it from, oh, well, it's because this happened to me when I was a child. Oh, well, it's because my mother didn't love me. Oh, it's because my father, I didn't have a father, right? That's still bound within the third dimensional realms of thinking. Fourth dimensional starts to open us up into our awareness of starting to be aware of the multiplicity of the dimensional realms, of spirits, of entities, of attachments, of these different things that might have an influence within our reality, and starting to have the validity to the different dimensional planes, to the dream realms, the astral realms, and these kinds of things. But even within the fourth dimension is still very highly targeted. And so it starts to move us out and starts to awaken us to this potentiality that, oh, I can manifest my reality in a completely different way. If I actually start to get out of the lower stations of my consciousness, I can actually start to recognize that I am not bound by time and space, and that I can actually recreate things not based on the physics, but it's starting to learn to manifest in the same way that we might call things in through lucid dreaming. And that's why lucid dreaming and these kinds of things are so important. Fifth dimensional levels of consciousness is a lot more rare in this reality, and most people only touch into it in moments of their life through meditation. But again, if somebody existed 100% within the state, they would not be here in a physical body.
Yeah.
Fifth dimensional levels of thinking is no mind, no thought, heart thinking. And it is at such a level that it really, the human mind can't even conceptualize the fifth dimension, because it's thinking through the heart. It's that shared collective and that shared awareness through heart base. It's really starting to connect into what we think of as the angelic realms, and we don't hardly have a way to even describe the angelic realms, let alone know it with our physical mind. So this is where we start to recognize it's that we can start to touch on these levels of awareness,
Mhm.
fleeting moments of it that we'll have in our meditations and in our experiences, or in our out of body experiences, or in our journeys that we might have. We'll touch onto these, but this is where you'll recognize people go like, oh man, but I don't know how to hang on to it. It's like, oh, but I lost it. I feel like that feeling isn't there anymore. And so we keep seeking to recreate it. And what we're doing is being that bridge. We're being that bridge that's learning how to anchor it in. So we be more and more of our Christed self
Mhm.
in this reality. But as it comes to where the way people talk about it is like, oh, well, we're on a 3D Earth. Oh, no, wait, Earth is evolving to 5D Earth. 5D Earth already exists.
Yeah.
5D Earth never disappeared. 7D Earth already exists. It's never disappeared. You know, the Aurora Earth in the Andromeda Mother Galaxy, or Eartha, it already exists. It's never disappeared. When your level of consciousness truly matches it, you will be there.
Yeah.
So that is the interesting thing that we get to see. And we can dive into other thoughts if you want, but we are shifting timelines. We are
Yeah.
watching a timeline battle happen on Earth.
Uh, we're really living in interesting times, and s- we are in a spiritual war, right?
Mhm.
And it's so important, like especially I was aware of it, of entities, and especially in the last couple of years, and been through a couple of experiences with that, and with friends and in a real life, and cleaning houses of entities and stuff like that, and different things. But when I was watching your one of your videos, I was like, especially actually with the you talk about the astral plane dimension in your cleaning. I always forget the whole name of the course, but uh, when I was watching that, I actually realized how attacked that level of consciousness it is, and how we are programmed, like through all the system. And forget about the food and the TV. That's like for kindergarten level. Like that's like, and all the others. And I was just like, damn, are my thoughts really my thoughts? Sometimes, and how you perceive the reality. But I would go here in stargates a little bit. I would like to touch stargates, 12 stargates, and what and grids, and why are they so important? Because the connection between us evolving, as everything you talked about now, cleaning our consciousness, or our past and stuff like that. Uh, why is that so important for the stargazing grids? The work, again, it's a big maybe question and like a lot to connect, but for me, because I like to see the bigger picture and I'm trying to like a puzzle. For me, it's like a puzzle, and then I'm just trying to find the right pieces of this puzzle and put it together, right? And it's kind of, I see that now since I can't join you, I feel much more responsibility of everything I do. You call it like what's it's not a grown-up spiritual man.
Uh,
What is, how do you,
Spiritual adulthood.
yeah, exactly that one. Exactly. And I'm like, okay, that's the right word, right? So, and I see how much my actions and the way I react and everything influence so much more than I thought. That's why.
Yeah. Yeah, it is wild because I agree. It's like every next level of awareness, I do the same thing where I'm like, oh my gosh, we start to recognize how much of a ripple effect that
Exactly.
we're placing into all the layers of creation simultaneously. And there truly is so much power within being in this first harmonic universe, and this is recognized in so many types of teachings out there. As you start to recognize this, you will find that there is an importance, and especially within, I believe it's Tibetan Buddhism, they talk about it like, of all the dimensional realms, of all the lokas, if you will, of all the heavens or all the realms where consciousness can be, that the human form is the most powerful and desired because it has the ability to actually transmute energy from this place in all the other dimensional planes. So there is more that we can shift and change in all creation here in this first harmonic universe than if we were, say, in the eighth dimension, which is wild to think about. So within this, the way that they keep showing it to me, because I love to go to the big picture too, is they keep bringing it back in and they say as above so below, and they keep coming back in to recognizing that the stargates, so the 12 tree grid of life, and these different uh, uh these different lines and grids within creation, the morphogenetic fields within creation, they are very much like our meridian lines within our body, energy lines within our body, that when they go out of alignment, they can actually start to cut off the energy that flows from source to a particular locale. And then if we lose that, it's like losing sunlight. It's like, unless we had the ability to go to the core of the earth and find it, just to be aware. I don't want to just say, hey, if we have no sun, we will die. We do know that we could go to the inner earth and survive within there. But I'm giving this more as a metaphor, that we know that if the sun stopped shining within the earth plane, plant life, the trees, the animals, anything on the surface would stop to exist. So it's very, very similar, the importance of the stargates and the energy systems. They say that when we recognize our level of consciousness, that you will realize that when you think, so here's one way to take it. When you're thinking, when you're sitting and meditating and contemplating, that you'll have particular levels or places that your consciousness will go. Like maybe you'll meditate on a particular location or the crystalline core of the earth or something. But unless a seal or an implant or a doorway or a stargate is cleared and open, your consciousness might not be aware of anything that's beyond it until that doorway gets opened. And then once it's opened, it's like, oh, I didn't know that was there. And now all of a sudden you can travel there in your consciousness and start to link your consciousness. They say the stargates exist very similarly to the way that you would access your memories in your
Mm.
memory bank. Where are they? There, it's like you can't sit and go like, oh, there it is. Even though we might sit and go like, oh, well, I can map where the constellations and the stars are. They say they don't quite work like that. That there's a sense that we're missing a lot of the interconnectedness of these filaments and these unseen currents of energy that move through all creation that instantaneously connect us in the same way as, like they say, a photon. You do one thing to a photon here, it's automatically doing something. It's who you are here is affecting every aspect of you in all your other avatars in every other dimensional plane. So they even show that within the earth, because I get super curious about this. I'm like, oh well, if I go to a Stargate, how is it like, say, how was that Stargate, say, in Giza going to the Sirius star system, right? Or how is it that you can go through this Stargate and walk out and end up on another place on planet Earth or in our solar system? And they say the easiest way to recognize this, just for our brain to get it, it's the same way as unlocking a memory. How, like, right now, you probably aren't thinking about your fifth birthday. But if I bring that up to you as just an awareness of your fifth birthday, and if you have a memory of it, you could maybe go back to remembering
Mhm.
something about your fifth birthday. But where was that? You probably haven't thought about that for how long? Like, where was that? The Stargates work, they say, very, very similarly, almost kind of as though the Earth, in some ways, as we see it as a body, it's still more like a brain than a body, which is blows my mind when I think about it, because I'm like, wow. So as we activate, as we connect, so the first steps many times is actually traveling physically to these different Stargate locations, because it's actually through your physical body and the electromagnetic field of your body connecting to the electromagnetic field of the records of the Earth on that point unlocks the Stargate. It's just inside of you in your DNA. And there's something about the transference of energy that unlocks, where all of a sudden maybe dreams or memories or things start to come back to you. And then what happens? The Akashic Library starts to bring these memories back to you, maybe by somebody saying, hey, did you check out this book? Or have you seen this website? Or have you listened to this podcast? All of that is just validation for whatever woke up in your body already. The minute you remember it, the consciousness field of Earth remembers it, and it starts to open up those passageways
Right.
again. That's a that's a that's a there's probably a lot more that would have to get explained, but that's kind of a metaphorical way.
I understand.
Yeah.
Look, again, I'm saying when I was preparing for this, I was like, okay, because why I'm asking all these questions is like when people are gonna watch this, right? I wanna touch so many different aspects of what you do and what we talk about. So if something triggers in them, they will have to watch it. I mean, do their own research anyway and find the sources and whatever, right? So
Yeah.
it's gonna be like that because for me. It's like when I'm reading a book, I don't really remember when was the last time I read a whole book, right? But it's
Yeah.
just like I'm reading, like, okay, I want to read this book. I start reading it, and there's like a chapter or a couple sentences, just like something clicks, and I'm like, oh, I don't want to read it. I got it like what I needed, and provide something else for me to start. I don't know how to explain, but it's just like, okay, now I have that information that I was actually looking for. I just know it. And like
Yeah.
suddenly this book is like, yeah, I'll come back later, maybe in 6 months and continue. And I'm gonna be like, oh, there's more information that I'm ready to hear it or whatever. But it comes that like the moment. So I'm trying to achieve that kind of way to with the different topics and connect, show the bigger
Yeah.
picture. But I mean, just the history you talked about. I mean, there's a books of 700 pages just about that. So it's impossible to put it in this time, right? Um, I have one more question, and then I think because I can do this 10 hours with you, but we don't have that time. But about the karma, right? And karmic cycles that we are. It's part of, as I understand, it's part of again the system to hold us in, right? Am I correct or not? And the question actually is, how can we stop the cycle, the karmic cycle? And because, or we coming back, or but if you are aware that you can stop it, my question is, even maybe that, maybe your path is to come back again. I don't know, but is there a way, because we are living in this kind of times now, to stop it really, like, and not to come back? Or it's just like, like in, or like, okay, this time, yeah, it's your turn not to come back. But for some others, like, yeah, oh, great, you're doing all this work, but yeah, you have to come another 10 times, whatever, like,
Yeah. That's a really great question because it's like again, a lot of times we can think that karma is an entrapment, something
yeah,
that is maybe being used as a way to keep us in a prison.
yeah,
And really, it's just physics.
okay.
It's just physics. So we could think of it a lot as the cause and effect and the ripples that no matter what, when we enter into a Maya system and when we enter into a matrix that has polarity within it, that we automatically start to create ripples within the system. You can't come into this incarnation in a physical body without creating ripples.
Hmm.
And those ripples, that if we don't constantly balance them, they create what we would think of as these karmas or these charges or these imbalances within our field. The biggest way that we can actually help ourselves is to recognize that most karmas are avoidable because most karmas are actually from our own feelings of the victim victimizer program or the blame, shame, and guilt. It's more that we make it personal, we make it about us, and now we start to have imbalances that are anti-Christic thoughts that start to bind the charge of those limiting beliefs within our system. And if we don't have pure Christic energy at the time of leaving, whatever is still held within our field, that's that magnetic stuff that kind of keeps us bound by karmas. Now, within this, as we start to recognize this, there are techniques. There's actually really cool techniques. Um, One of the primary tech there, let me give two examples of techniques. One technique is actually the dream rewind program, and this is taught in a lot of, I think, maybe it's lucid dreaming, out of body, but I actually think this comes from maybe even Tibetan dream work, because they would use the lucid dreams a lot to accelerate the practices here, clearing the stuff. And that is that at the end of the day, before you go to bed, you actually do your day in reverse. You kind of reverse it, and then you hash out everything that you've ever had where you have an emotional charge to it, or that the deep subconscious didn't figure it out. It didn't clear it out of the field. So you could almost think of karmas as places where our subconscious hasn't cleared something out and processed something and it gets stuck in our field. And so when you do that, it's kind of like every day you're doing past life review so that you don't have to get to the end of your life and have a big old pile of past life review to go through. And so that's one way to process stuff so that you can actually run the crystal river energy through it to have neutral, compassionate witness,
Hmm.
forgiveness, balance all energies within there. A secondary thing within this is a really ancient alchemical process, and that was something I've dubbed carbon to carbon to carbon, and recognizing that carbon is where the karma gets stuck in our body. And so if you can actually, at any time you have an emotional charge to something, can't figure something out, working something out, you get a carbon pencil and you write it out on a piece of paper. So you're actually transferring whatever the karma is onto the paper. And then from there, you read it out loud and then you burn it. And that's the third carbon. So the carbon in you takes that karma and puts it onto the carbon on the paper, and then you burn it in the fire and you clear it out of your body. It's just an alchemical process that starts to recognize that karma is actually really just a physics thing that happens in this reality. Now, there's a third thing we need to be recognizing as far as karma, and that is that we have all of these fallen angelics or negative alien beings or these astral beings that are really super smart. We got to give credit where credit is due. We got to give credit to these beings that are these literal evil geniuses out there. And these evil geniuses know the laws of the physics of this creation. And so they've been doing something to the human species for a long time, which is called karma transference or karma dumping. They dump their karma or debt onto us in our blood through blood rituals, through blood sacrifice, through all these things, and they dump their karma onto us. And we end up living many times, many incarnational lifetimes, repaying karma and debt that doesn't even belong to us. That's the karma trap. That's the recycling and the reincarnation.
Okay.
So this is where we actually start to learn the clearing processes where we say, ah, no, I don't agree to pay anyone else's bills for them. I didn't agree to it. So we can actually, through divine law and counsel, take everything that's in our blood, our carbon, and our signature, and just say, I'm doing a full audit. You know, we have a term of what an audit is. It means you're reviewing everything. You go through a full audit of everything that's in your fields and shields. And you say, any of it that's not mine, whether or not I agree to it, willingly or unwillingly, knowing or unknowing, I'm balancing creation and I'm saying I will not act against divine law. I will not take on the karma or debt that belongs to someone else in their own life path or journey. And I give it back to them now. So we can start to recognize that in a lifetime, that the more we align to Christic thoughts, neutral, compassionate witness, being the witness of our own life experience and not self-identifying with the things here, but rather starting to just have this compassion even to the things that we are thinking, feeling, or have gone through in our life. We neutralize the charge of the energy to the things within our field. It literally could be to the moment of somebody say is taking our life. And that if you could literally have non-judgment in that moment and even unconditional love for that being taking the life, you will not create a karmic bonding, because that is one of the biggest reincarnational bondings, is that if we've had karmic disruption with another person in another lifetime, more than likely you're going to marry them in the next life. You're going to have a child with them, or they will be your child, they will be your parent, it will be your sibling. For whatever reason, the more charge we have with an individual from a past lifetime, they generally become more intimately connected to us in a future lifetime.
Awesome. So you're even closer to that.
Yeah,
So
it's
you
like,
can
oh,
learn it. I understand. Well, yeah. Well, great. Becca, look, I have 1,000 other questions, but it's been almost 2 hours. So, uh, you have any for the end? Would you like to, from your own message, guardian's message, whatever message, if you have anything to say for the end?
well, there was one last thing I wanted to add about the stargates, and I'll
Okay.
use this as kind of like a just a summary within, and that is, they say they don't use metaphor of the meridians as just a metaphor, it's literal. And in the same way that you could get acupuncture on a particular point, say maybe on your foot, but it's affecting all the way to say a point, kidney one in your foot is going to connect to kidney, I don't know what number, all the way at the very top, right? It ends way up here. Um, they're saying that's really how the stargates work. And a lot of times we're connecting to these stargates that are very much like these meridian points of the universe,
Mm,
and that you have the entire universe within you.
yep.
That in whatever place that you are right now, even if you feel like you don't know very much or that you feel blocked or disconnected or anything like that, find the place within you that can find unconditional love, a connection to the source field. If you need to start with just learning to love yourself, that's the most important place to start. To be able to get to this place that just can, you can legitimately look in the mirror and love you. That within that very moment, that you truly are already opening that initial stargate to have access to all the wisdoms, to all aspects of thyself, and that within there there is no magical thing that's going to happen in this reality where all of a sudden this wand is going to happen and all of a sudden, ta-da. It's like all of you is already within you, and it is a journey, it is a process. We unravel little by little by little, and the more that we just enjoy the journey, love the places that feel blocked or stuck, or that we don't feel like we have our memories or our understanding what is happening, that we can be within those places, love that energy, open ourselves to just being curious about it, and that just that willingness to not make the blocks wrong is what starts to allow us to open those places up, that we are already divinely perfect exactly the way that we are, and that just our intention towards having our communion and our connection to intending to return home to our universal family is the most important energy. That the more that we hang on to that within every waking thought, that at the time of death, that let that be our thought, and that thought will lead us home.
Perfect. Perfect. Perfect ending. Thank you, Becca. Thank you for your time and all the knowledge you shared, and hopefully we do it again. Um,
Yeah,
have a lovely day the rest of the day. Thank you.
thank you.